only 4 companies in the world are worth more than $2 trillion.
Jensen Huang is wearing a black leather jacket. He is standing in front of a stadium of screaming fans. He is signing a woman's chest with a permanent marker.
Is that a good idea?
The media calls him a generational visionary. Wall Street prices his company at over $4 trillion.
Big news was Nvidia hitting $4 trillion in market cap.
They look at Nvidia and see an untouchable empire. But untouchable is a very specific kind of illusion. Jensen Huang is not just a hardware engineer. He is the architect of the most sophisticated corporate cult in modern history. And this rock star persona was entirely manufactured for one specific reason: misdirection. He desperately needs you to look at the stadiums of cheering fans, because if you actually looked at his physical supply chain, you would panic. Nvidia is a fabless company. They do not physically manufacture a single microchip. Instead, their entire empire is held together by a terrifyingly fragile relay race. It relies on a ruthless Dutch optical monopoly, a single muddy quartz mine in rural North Carolina, and a Taiwanese power grid that is currently sitting on a 5% operating margin. Buying Nvidia feels like the safest bet in the modern stock market, but it is actually the most concentrated geopolitical risk in the history of capitalism. This is how one man used a leather jacket to blind the smartest investors on Earth, and how a single broken link will bring the entire house of cards crashing down. Every tech giant has an origin myth. Nvidia's started inside a Denny's diner in San Jose back in 1993. Today, Jensen Huang commands a personal fortune of roughly $155 billion. But unlike traditional executives, he weaponizes his visibility. He tours international technology expos like a pop icon. He eats at street-side diners in Taipei to project blue-collar humility. He projects momentum, inevitability, and absolute control.
I'm here to tell you that right now where I stand, a few short months after GTC DC, I see through 2027 at least $1 trillion.
And the market buys it.
Nvidia, as it makes a new all-time high once again.
Now, shares of Nvidia, of course, had a huge gain yesterday.
But this intense public worship is not just about charisma. It is anchored by a very real, very ruthless software trap. In 2006, Jensen launched CUDA.
Tell me about CUDA technology.
CUDA is an architecture. We actually call it CUDA. CUDA is an architecture of parallel computing.
It was a coding platform that forced programmers to write AI using only NVIDIA's proprietary language. Once a developer builds a complex model in CUDA, they are locked in. Switching to a competitor like AMD means burning years of engineering work. NVIDIA didn't just build a highly efficient microchip, they built the toll road every AI developer is forced to drive on. This software moat creates the illusion of invincibility. It makes the empire look untouchable from the outside. But software is just abstract math. Math eventually needs a physical body to exist in the real world. And this is where the untouchable myth begins to crack, because NVIDIA does not own the body. Nvidia is a fabless semiconductor company. They design the blueprints. They command the hype cycle. But they do not physically forge a single microchip themselves. Their entire physical existence is outsourced. It depends on a highly concentrated international relay race. First, you need extreme ultraviolet light to print the atomic circuits. Only one company on Earth can generate it: ASML, an optical manufacturer in the Netherlands. Their machines cost over $350 million each. The engineering inside them is brutal and precise. ASML fires 50,000 microscopic droplets of molten tin through a vacuum every second. They blast each droplet with a 30-kilowatt laser. This vaporizes the tin into a plasma reaching 220,000 degrees Celsius. That is nearly 40 times hotter than the surface of the sun. Without these Dutch machines, Jensen's blueprints are just digital paper. But printing the chip isn't the primary choke point. Assembling it is. Nvidia relies entirely on one Taiwanese island to package their hardware, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, or TSMC. Nvidia aggressively hoarded 80% of TSMC's advanced packaging capacity. They starved competitors to maintain their dominance. It looked like a masterstroke of supply chain control, but relying on a single point of failure introduces risk. Recently, the most advanced hardware in human history started physically warping. For their massive Blackwell chips, TSMC utilized an organic plastic packaging layer. When the AI chip ran complex workloads, the hardware generated extreme heat. The silicon, the plastic, and the metal all expanded at radically different rates. This thermal mismatch caused the chips to physically bend under pressure. The microscopic connections snapped. A $4 trillion empire was temporarily paralyzed by melting plastic. The untouchable tech giant is entirely at the mercy of materials it does not own. The illusion of invincibility requires the market to ignore the physical world. But the physical world is unforgiving. Before a multi-million-dollar chip is designed, you need raw silicon. You must melt that silicon inside a crucible at 1,000 degrees Celsius. If that crucible has a single microscopic impurity, the chip is destroyed. Trace amounts of iron or aluminium will ruin the entire wafer. This introduces another massive point of leverage. 70 to 90% of the world's high-purity quartz comes from exactly one place, a single geological anomaly located in Spruce Pine, North Carolina, an Appalachian town of barely 2,200 people. 380 million years ago, tectonic plates collided without water present. This created the only natural quartz pure enough to build semiconductor crucibles. In September 2024, Hurricane Helene devastated the region. It dumped over 2 feet of rain and triggered massive mudslides. The vital mining operations were forced to shut down.
The semiconductor supply chain is entirely dependent on one mineral called high-purity quartz, and virtually the entire global supply of that quartz comes from one tiny town called Spruce Pine, North Carolina. Now, Spruce Pine saw 2 feet of rainfall from Hurricane Helene.
The global AI supply chain was nearly halted because of flooded dirt in a single American county. But even if the Appalachian dirt holds, the Taiwanese grid might not. TSMC's factories consume an astonishing amount of natural resources. By 2030, they will devour over 80% of Taiwan's semiconductor energy budget. The vulnerability is that Taiwan imports 97% of its total energy. They rely on continuous maritime shipments of coal and liquefied natural gas. And in May 2025, Taiwan officially shut down its Ma'anshan nuclear power plant.
Ma'anshan nuclear power plant in Pingtung is reaching the end of its life.
They eliminated their last reliable source of zero-carbon baseload power. The Taiwanese energy grid is now running on a dangerously thin 5% reserve margin. The untouchable AI empire is plugged into a wall socket that is struggling to stay alive. You can dig out a flooded quartz mine with heavy machinery. You can ration island electricity during a summer heat wave, but a cult of personality cannot stop geopolitics. The aura of invincibility shatters completely when you look at who actually holds the leash. The United States government maintains ultimate control over Nvidia's revenue.
5% 4 years ago is about 50% today, because of the limitations on the products that we sell.
The Bureau of Industry and Security dictates exactly what Nvidia is legally allowed to sell. When Washington restricted processing speeds, Jensen Huang had to bow. He forced his engineers to deliberately cripple their own flagship chips. They built degraded hardware variants just to legally maintain access to Chinese buyers. In early 2026, the US surprisingly approved the powerful H200 chip for China, but they attached a highly punitive 25% tariff. Beijing retaliated instantly. Chinese customs authorities blocked the incoming Nvidia chips. Overnight, an estimated $14 to $16 billion in Nvidia orders were frozen. The supply chain was plunged into regulatory purgatory. And then, just as suddenly, the geopolitical winds shifted. Jensen Huang announced that H200 manufacturing was officially restarting, simply because a government bureaucrat finally signed the necessary export licenses. This is the stark reality hiding behind the untouchable myth. A $4 trillion supply chain can be paralyzed, degraded, and restarted by a single politician's pen. And this massive corporate dependency all sits on an island facing a constant military threat. For decades, Taiwan survived under the theoretical protection of the Silicon Shield, the belief that the US would defend TSMC to prevent a global economic collapse. But Washington is currently forcing TSMC to build duplicate factories in Arizona. As the United States secures its own domestic chip supply, Taiwan loses its absolute geographic leverage. The vital Silicon Shield is slowly eroding. The geographic foundation holding up Jensen Huang's empire is fundamentally shifting. This year, the largest tech hyperscalers are locked in a vicious spending war. Microsoft, Google, Meta, and Amazon. Together, they will deploy an estimated $700 billion into AI capital expenditures.
So much money.
Almost all of that monumental capital flows directly toward Nvidia. The global financial market views this as the safest strategic bet of the decade. They look at the iconic leather jacket and the soaring stock price. They see an untouchable king sitting securely on an untouchable throne. But the safest bets in the market are usually just highly dependent systems in deep disguise. Jensen Huang's true masterpiece is not a highly efficient microchip. His greatest creation is the myth itself. He built a public persona so large, so loud, and so overwhelmingly confident that it completely blinds the world. It actively stops retail and institutional investors from looking at the Dutch optical monopolies. It distracts them from the flooded Appalachian quartz mines. It hides the fragile power grids of Taipei. And it masks the bureaucratic chokeholds tightening around the supply chain. Nvidia is a towering empire balanced precisely on the edge of a geopolitical knife. Jensen's manufactured cult of personality is the only thing making it look like an impenetrable fortress. True power is never just about massive market capitalization or software dominance. Real power is about physical leverage and control of the underlying assets. Nvidia has the image of absolute control, but relies on a world it does not own. And when a multi-trillion-dollar empire looks completely untouchable, you should always ask exactly what they are trying so desperately